But now there's one thing which is interesting, that's the proportions. The proportions will produce a leverage phenomenon. I want you to observe those elements. If you consider 75, it's only 10% of your contribution margin. But if your profit increases by 75 also, since your profit is smaller than your contribution margin, the increase in percentage of your profit, you see it here, it's 20% when the contribution margin only increased by 10%. I wrap up the ideas. First idea, with fixed cost being fixed, what you do to your contribution margin, you do it to your EBIT. But your EBIT is smaller than your contribution margin because your EBIT, that's the contribution margin minus fixed cost. They both increase by the same amount, 75, but the profit is smaller than the contribution margin. Hence, in percentage, the increase in profitability will be higher than the increase in contribution margin. In other words, increasing your contribution margin in percentage allows you to increase your profitability by a higher percentage. It's a leverage phenomenon. It's an amplification. Just because you have fixed cost and because they are fixed, anything positive you do to your contribution margin is leverage in percentage when you consider your EBIT. Yes?
And then what if you decrease it?
Of course, a leverage, is a very neutral thing. If you decrease your contribution margin, your EBIT would decrease in a higher proportion. So it's a double-edged thing. Many financial people dislike the idea of leverages because they say that it creates volatility. I'm personally neutral about leverages. It's neither good nor bad. If it exists, you should try to take advantage of them. Once you know that they exist, maybe you understand that you should try to increase your contribution margin by all means. Yes?
Where the 75...
Here I imagine the situation where somehow let's imagine that we can increase the contribution margin by 75. What would happen to your profitability? It would also increase by 75, but it would represent an increase in percentage by 20% instead of 10. That's a leverage phenomenon which is called operating leverage. In fact, here, the operating leverage, the degree, this number 2 that you see here, is called DOL. And DOL stands for degree of operating leverage. And we will come back to that, but I can already show you this. The DOL, you calculate it like this. Contribution margin over EBIT. So if I make a screen capture here, and if I paste it here, if I calculate the contribution margin of a profit, DOL equal 750 over 375. And that's why the DOL is 2. And that number 2 applies to the change in contribution margin in percentage. The key equation is this one. I'm going to write it now. So the key equation is change in EBIT in percentage equal change in contribution margin in percentage times degree of operating leverage. So 10%, the change in contribution margin, multiplied by 2 equal 20%.